Welcome to the Academy of Esports Podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan. I am here with my first repeat guest to the podcast. I am bringing back Jay Collins to the podcast this week. Jay, thank you for being on the Academy of Esports again.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Well, I had you on the podcast over the summer, so it must be some pretty significant news that I would have you back so quickly, other than you were a great guest, obviously, the first time. But things have kind of accelerated, I guess, in the realm of esports for us at the high school levels. We've started to see a lot of consolidation. We've started to see associations form, leagues form. But there's always, it seems to me that there always seems to be a different spin or a different take on how leagues and associations are forming. And I think based off of the model that you and Tristan and your group in Cleveland, Ohio came up with over this past school year, I think it's an interesting model. And in fact, you've taken it to the next level. Can you kind of make an announcement as to what I'm alluding to?
Yeah, gosh. So here's the problem with my life in one sentence, which is that I own a lot of hats. And so I wear lots of different hats at different times, and I seem to keep buying more and more hats. So I think the last time that I was on, I was mostly talking in the role of coach, right? Because I'm a teacher at Hathaway Brown School, and there is a place, that is the place where I end up coaching an esports team. And I think what I mentioned before was that when we went to look for a place for our team to play, we couldn't find any place really where they could compete for various reasons.
And Jay, can you just remind, or people who have never listened to this before, what is your experience at Hathaway Brown? Give us a kind of a, I guess, the best short recap of what that might be or what that is.
Yeah, of course. So I got there last year, coming from the Department of Education and Fable Vision Studios. And I came in as a computer science teacher with the idea that we were going to be doing esports. This was going to be, we found out later, the first ever all-girls high school that had an esports team. And we tried to play by the book. We tried to get all of the kind of check the popular boxes, and we found that it didn't work. We found a whole lot of reasons why it didn't work, many of that based on the structure of existing leagues or the games that they were selecting or different things like that. And so instead of kind of making a square peg fit into a round hole, what we decided to do is kind of just make up our own little league in Cleveland and try something different. And the ramifications of that have been pretty significant. So we found that the folks that did participate in the league really loved it. They thought and felt like it was something much different than what they had been experiencing before. And so, like I said, went out and bought a new hat, so to speak, and decided that I guess maybe we should keep doing this. And if we keep doing this, then maybe we should make it larger as well. So we're expanding. We are having the same kind of league that we had here last year in Cleveland, but this year we will be adding communities in different cities as well. And we will be kind of growing the footprint, working more with game companies and nonprofits in particular, to try and expand what is being offered and to see if this model is something different in a significant way from the other things that are out there.
Now, this model that you're talking about, this league that you're talking about, what are you calling this league?
So we like to make a lot of trouble, so it made sense to call it the Mischief League. The idea is that if high school esports is going to change before it's kind of crystallized into the model that's out there right now, then we're probably going to have to cause a little bit of mischief to make sure that folks are listening and trying new things.
And again, there's already a number of leagues out there. Some states have their own associations where they're competing. You've got Playversus, you've got HSEL, EGF, I think, EGL. Yeah, there's a lot of them. So there's now another league, but again, you're taking the model that you had from Cleveland and kind of expanding it out. What are some of the key, I guess, things that makes Mischief League different than what everybody else might be doing or other people are doing with their associations or their leagues or their conferences?
Yeah, I think there's at least two major differences that anyone coming from another league would be surprised to see. One is that we don't have a fixed set of games that we play. So most other games or most other leagues are built around a single title or a collection of titles that stay consistent year to year. And the idea there is that you're getting students who are investing a large amount of time, a large amount of skill, developing their abilities at a particular game. And to me, as a teacher, that feels a little off. That feels a little bit like a marketing ploy, to be honest. If I have my students working over the summer, I don't necessarily want them working at the same game that they've been working at every year. I want them to kind of be expanding their horizons. And so you're not going to see the typical games here. And you're not going to be seeing those games multiple times either, because we actually change the games that we play every year. So that is a big difference. It also, in my view, rests a lot of the power and authority with the league, that being the school voice, as opposed to the game company. Because as we've seen with certain game companies, certainly Riot has had a fair number of scandals. Now Blizzard having their scandal as well. Anytime that a school is beholden to a particular game company and saying that this is the game that we play, and all of the other schools that we play with play the same game, it becomes very hard for a school to leave that league or leave that game and retain its relationships. And so we wanted the ability to be agile, because honestly, scandals are going to happen, right? And schools need the ability to respond to that. So that's one major difference. And the second major difference is that we don't mark rankings based on how you do a single game. What I mean by that is that we have what we kind of call the triathlon model, where students are competing at multiple different games throughout the year, and then their wins and losses for those games over the year go towards an overall league standing. So your team can't just be good at one game. Your team has to be able to be good at lots of different games. And again, for me as an educator, that means that students are going to spend less time drilling on one game and more time trying to understand their team dynamics, how to work together, falling into roles of leadership and things like that.
Now, again, very different model than what everybody else is doing. And I love that it isn't just doing what everybody else is doing it and putting a different label on it or putting a slightly different spin. You've taken a completely different approach to it. Again, you're saying we're not going to play the traditional games. How, for the games that you're going to choose, do you have a selection criteria around those? Say by developing company or the makeup of the company or the makeup of the game characters or anything of that regard? Where are you looking to get your game title suggestions from, and how are you selecting them?
Yeah, I think one thing that inspired a lot of these conversations is that a lot of schools were out there, like my own, were out there looking at leagues and finding barriers. That league was too expensive, or that league plays games that we don't like, or this or that. And so what we wanted to try and do was make this dead simple. So for example, there's a lot of controversy around having first-person shooters in schools. I recognize that. I think that there is evidence on both sides. And I think that there are parents who are supportive and parents who are against, and same thing with school administrations. My thinking right now is that there are plenty of other leagues out there that folks can participate in first-person shooter tournaments if they would like to. So why have that debate again, right? So one of our restrictions is we don't play first-person shooters in our league. Make it easy to say yes. And also, honestly, a lot of my students like Fortnite, right? Some of them even like Counter-Strike, but they also like Mario Kart and plenty of other games. So why shoot for the one that's, no pun intended, for the controversial one, as opposed to the one that it's a little bit easier to run in schools. I think another thing that we're really looking hard at are companies that have higher ethical and moral standards. Again, this goes back to scandals, right? I have a school full of girls, to be honest, and when things like sexual harassment scandals break out, or even just looking at the game and seeing poor representation of women has an effect on their ability to compete, has an effect on their morale and their perceptions of what games are, and perceptions of themselves as well. So we're really looking for games out there that have the ability to kind of elevate the conversation as opposed to drag it down.
I know that one of the hopes that I have for my scholar gamers is, as we're developing our culture around Racine's esports programming, is that they do become more aware of the titles that they're playing and how those companies represent or put themselves out in a public sense. Also, again, this is starting to learn more about the Worlds. I mean, you look at Riot. Riot is not its own company. It's a subsidiary. It was bought out by Tencent, which is a Chinese conglomerate company. Blizzard is owned part of it. Epic has part of them also owned by Tencent. So there's a lot of interesting consolidations now. And as we know, gaming is now not only a political issue, it's also an equity issue. So with college scholarships now coming on board, I see a lot of, while people say you have to play these game titles if you want to get to college, I've gotten plenty of coaches I've talked to at the collegiate levels who say they would rather find skill sets or things that kids can do that they can transfer into other games. They don't necessarily have to come in as the best player in, say, Overwatch, which is a game I'm sure that you're not going to be playing in your league, but there may be skills that they can learn that transfer over. So what philosophical, I guess, backing beyond the non-first person shooter, what philosophical backing or thoughts or ideas are you working with in the formation of the Mischief League?
Yeah, I think there's this kind of mistaken idea that there's one path through esports. And if you think about it in terms of any other sport or activity that schools do, this thinking just immediately falls apart, right? By and large, high schools do not run football programs on the off chance that one of their players will make it to the NFL. Maybe in Texas, maybe, but most other high schools recognize that football, basketball, baseball, they have other benefits besides making it to the pro leagues. Mm-hmm. And so they don't treat their students as if they are budding professional stars. They treat them as students who can find lots of value in different places. And I'm going to go and say, moving away from sports metaphors, mm-hmm. that we see the same sort of thing in first robotics, mm-hmm. speech debate, theater, right? Marching band.
Hey, Jay, I was telling somebody this weekend about how important it is that we're doing with esports. I said, when I showed up at Purdue University, the first thing I joined, or I was a member, I got there a week early. I got to be in the marching band. I show up and there's 400 people who I immediately know and recognize now and have a social structure around. If it hadn't been for the marching band at Purdue, I would have left college. I would have not have finished at Purdue University. I'm convinced of it. When everything else was going badly in my life, the marching band is what kept me afloat and kept me going. So yeah, to your point about kids always needing something, this is, for a lot of kids, this is their tribe. This is what they need.
It's exactly right. I could tell you so many stories. I mean, we've only been running esports at Hathaway Brown for 8 months, right? Mm-hmm. And already I can tell you so many stories. 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders coming in and saying, these are my friends, right? Mm-hmm. These are people. When Game Lab is shut down, they go and they sometimes sit in corners of hallways, working on their own. When they're in the room playing together, they're laughing, they're talking, they're sharing stories, and they're comforting each other. I mean, it's a world of difference. And again, I don't think most schools operate their theater programs expecting someone to discover the next, Brad Pitt or whomever. And I don't think most marching bands operate with the next person who's going to be, I don't even know, right? The next Michael Bolton. We recognize.
Hey, Neil Armstrong was in the Purdue marching band, by the way. He played baritone. So the next person to walk on the moon, we'll use that one as the.
Okay. All right. And, but there are benefits to it. There's intangible benefits to it and tangible ones too. Mm-hmm. So I just think that, the more that we can use esports as a pathway. And so that's one of the reasons why we have a variety of different games that we're playing this year, and we're going to be packaging each of them with pathways, right? So you will play a game and we will be sending out content to the coaches that they're using, saying, here's a way to hook your students' interest from this game into something else that can be productive for them. So as an example, our first game that we're going to be playing this year is a drone racing simulator. So what are we going to send out with that? A bunch of information on how to build drones as part of your computer science curriculum, how to code drones, and all these other sorts of things. Because honestly, they should probably practice racing their drones online first before they start racing them in real life anyways. So it makes for a really nice ramp, right? So we're exploring a lot of those different ways that we can use games to hook interest into other things and less focus on how you can be the next Fortnite all-star.
And you, as I understand it, you also have the backing of ISTE behind this. Is that correct?
Yeah. So looking at so this is a little bit complicated.
Okay.
Looking at the path that got us here. Looking at the league last year, we recognized that it was getting too big to keep it inside of a school. So we started looking around at different kinds of legal structures that would support it. And what we decided was that the best way to put this forward in an honest and earnest way was to create a nonprofit for it.
Okay.
And so we situated this in a new nonprofit dedicated to empowering teens and tweens through esports, and it's called GG Plus. And so as part of that nonprofit runs the league.
Okay.
And our board of directors includes a group of 4 individuals that I think really represent the values and the mission of our organization. So the first person on that board is ISTE's chief of membership and partnerships, Rhonda Ford.
Okay.
And really excited to be working directly with her on how we can bring this content to ISTE's members and how we can, more importantly, bring ISTE's professional development resources to the folks engaging in the league. The second board member, DJ Moreau, she's head of partnerships for Games for Change. Same sort of thing, a wonderful organization that can help educators connect with a community of others who also use games in the classroom. And so again, I think a great opportunity to be sharing and building communities across those bridges. We also have Dr. Elizabeth Newberry.
Love Dr. Liz.
I don't know if she's been on this show yet.
She has not yet, but I will get her.
You should. You should. So she heads up games for the federal government. She has a PhD in esports and gender-related studies from Cornell. She is a nonstop citation machine and just a wonderful person. So really looking forward to working with her very closely on this. And then our fourth is actually Christina Kelly, who's had over 10 years of experience in esports media and has worked very closely with some of the players and on working through the toxicity of esports environments, and was actually deeply involved with the Overwatch League for a while as well as an employee of Blizzard. So really welcoming all these kind of perspectives, which are very different from each other, to come together and give us a good theoretical and personal basis for the league.
And given that you're playing non-conventional games, again, I kind of go back to, I only say non-conventional just because it's not that they're not conventional. Okay. How do I say this right? The stereotypical esports games. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. Because these games,
they're not the games in the pro league.
What's that? Say again?
They're not the games in the pro league.
Right. Exactly. Or even in a lot of the collegiate ranks. But what is going to be, I guess, your process for selecting the games? I think I kind of alluded to that question earlier, but again, you've told me what you're playing or what you're starting with. For example, you're starting with the drone game, but I think I saw also Dota 2 was on that list of your initial games. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Dota 2 is going to be played in the spring. We're going to be tying that one into ideas of civics and teamwork. Okay.
And what's the third game that you're starting with?
The third game, so in between those two, is Brawlhalla.
Oh yes.
Which is a 2D fighter, a little bit similar to Super Smash Brothers, but free and open.
And has the Adventure Time characters.
Yeah, so you're more of an Adventure Time, less of a wrestling person, because it also has wrestling characters in it as well. Gotcha.
But how? So I guess, are we looking at, as you're choosing these games, Are these coming to you in the future? Or is it going to come from suggestions from other students? Is this going to come from suggestions from companies approaching you directly? How are you going to do that? And what are the criteria that you're looking for other than non-first person shooters?
Yeah, it's a mix. So I think what we're trying to get at is a diversity of styles of play. Something that folks really appreciated last year was that there were just straight up different kinds of games and different configurations. I'm really excited that this year we're going to have Liftoff, right, which is the drone racing game. That's going to be 1 versus 1, and it's a racing game. Brawlhalla is going to be the next one. That's 2 on 2, and it's a fighting game. Very different kinds of students, very different kinds of players involved in those. The third one, right, Dota 2, 5 on 5, highly strategic. I think the team that I've seen at our school who's interested in that, they don't play Brawlhalla, right? And so that's, again, an interesting thing to me is when you start getting students coming in that play different things. And then we actually have a 4th game. I know we say it's a triathlon model, but it's a quadathlon. Now,
I think that's what it would be, quadathlon. Okay.
And the 4th game actually runs all season long. This is the craziest one, and this is the thing that I'm most excited about. The fourth game is actually a game that everybody knows, Minecraft. And
yes. Okay.
And so instead of having schools or libraries compete with each other, they're actually going to be paired up. So they're going to get a paired buddy, and they're going to have all season to build a world that meets certain challenges and criteria, which is then going to be reviewed by a panel of educators from schools and libraries. So the people who are interested in the collaborative Minecraft team are not typically the people who are interested in 2-on-2 fighting, who are not the same people who are in the 1-on-1 drone racing and all those sorts of things. So I think back to your original question, not trying to dodge.
No, you're good.
But the idea of a diverse set of play styles ranging from collaborative world building to head-on-head racing, the difference in player numbers. Yes, some of this is based on student feedback. It's also based on coach feedback. And yes, some companies have reached out to us as well. So I think it's a mix of all of those things together, as well as a recognition that we have to move on from the games last year. So I think we're going to see even more interesting things. I know that I'm still rooting for a game that's in beta. I think that would just be wonderful, right? That we have a game that people are competing at that literally no one has played before, because it's going to have everybody on the same boat. A couple other technical requirements that we have is that it has to be playable on a desktop. Okay. So all of our games are PC and Mac accessible this season. You only need 5 PCs, mid-range, nothing too high. And they also have to be, we also try and select a mix of free and low-cost games. So 2 of our games are free. The other 2, we actually have financial aid for schools who can't afford them. So they're relatively low cost either way. So, but it's important to us to be removing as many access barriers while also providing as diverse of an experience as possible. So it's kind of a balancing act.
Now, you did bring up the cost thing. So as we've seen, there are leagues and associations. For example, our Wisconsin High School Esports Association, we charge $100 per school per year. Doesn't matter how many kids you have, doesn't matter how many games you play in our association. That's what we charge. The other one, Play Versus, $64 per student per season per game. Yes, it's and some I know who are doing it for nothing. They charge no fees at all. What is Mischief League going to cost, I guess, in a typical sense, not a hardship, a financial hardship or anything of that? What are we talking approximately outside of hardware?
My absolute goal is to make it so that a school or library that doesn't have any money can still participate so long as they have 5 computers. And so participation in the league is free. If you need support buying the copies of the game, licenses of the games, we have that available. Okay. There is no cost associated with that. Later this year, actually probably late winter, we're going to provide an option for a paid membership. This paid membership has nothing to do with whether or not you get to compete in the league. Instead, this is a little crazy. I love it so much. Instead, what it does is it provides bundled professional development resources for educators. So, yeah, right. Because it's like, what?
Well, there's a whole lot of what going on. I still am amazed when I go to conferences and I say the word esports. And of course, we live, breathe, eat what that is in the educational sense. There is no way that there's not enough people who even know what it. I'm still explaining to them when I say organized competitive video games, and they kind of look at me like, "What do you mean by that?" I know that rumors are out there that there's upwards of 10,000 plus schools who already have programs that they're interested in. Play Versus is saying, "Hey, we've got 13,000 schools who are either coming on board or are in place to have a team." Guess what? If there's 13,000 of those, there's 16,000 Starbucks in the United States. It feels like we're tripping over Starbucks wherever we go. I feel like I should be tripping over esports teams, but I'm not. So, and I'm still trying to explain to people what this is. And so, I guess, what do you see going on right now in given that you created this model, that you had a reason behind it, but what do you see going on right now really in the high school esports realm, if you will?
I see rapid adoption. And as an educator, as an attorney, as a computer scientist, anytime I see rapid adoption, I see red flags. Mm-hmm. And so I really want folks out there to be able to invest their time and their money smartly. Mm-hmm. I think the most powerful thing that I've ever heard at a conference came from Peggy Shee. I don't know if you know her, but she's a wonderful game-based educator who is often at Serious Play and Games for Change and a lot of these conferences that I end up at too. And she said, to paraphrase, mm-hmm. game developers need to recognize that they are holding in their hands the most pivotal years of children's lives. And the hours that a student invests in their game, those are hours that they're not going to get back. So you need to make them worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we run a real risk when we start doing things like building incredibly expensive stadiums or investing too much of our money into super high-end computers or playing just one game and telling our students to drill on that for hours and hours instead of something else. I think we risk really robbing them of parts of their childhood, and that's not okay. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do is get folks to slow down a little bit, to think about the value propositions that they're working with, and to create a space where it's okay to experiment, to take things not quite as seriously, to cause a little bit of mischief, and to do some other activities as well. And I think that runs true for teachers too. We don't have a lot of time. And so if there's a way that you could put a line item in your budget for esports and get it funded, and it's also providing you with professional development resources on things not related to esports, I think that's a really big win, because I'm telling you, as a teacher, we need a lot of support.
Yeah, that's one of the things I feel that is missing from a lot of the leagues. NASEF has developed curriculum that I know. HSEL kind of developed a short curriculum, if you will. Play Versus, I have not seen anything come out of it yet, but I know what I'm looking for, and that is I want the Hogwarts of esports. I want to find that school of gaming that is like the school of wizardry. It's like Hogwarts. Yes, we're learning to be wizards, but in this case, what we're learning to be is gamers, but all the other things that come with it. So not just, again, playing the game, but as you're saying, all these other skills that are going to come out through the gameplay. You're using the gameplay in a way that's different than even I have thought about using it, because you're saying, hey, here's this drone game. Now let's have you actually build drones and actually learn how to fly them afterwards, which is not really a connection that's being made through a lot of our esports programs.
No, and even the game company was like, they're based out in Belgium, mm-hmm. And they were like, you're doing what now? And I'm like, didn't you make this for this reason, right? Like, where else can a student non-destructively fly a drone? And where else could a teacher say, hey, did you enjoy that? Let's actually build it, right? That just makes so much sense. I'll tell you, here's my spiel on curriculum.
Sure.
Right. So I used to work for the Smithsonian Institution. I led a lot of game-based education initiatives for them. And our office in particular used to send out a magazine to every school in the nation, every secondary school, every elementary school. And this is a glossy magazine that came with Smithsonian content, and it came with all of these lesson plans and all this sort of stuff to put Smithsonian content directly in your classroom. So Awesome idea. We did a multi-million-dollar research study on it, and we found out that a lot of them thrown out, right?
Yeah.
Straight into the recycle bin. And the ones that were appreciated, what did they do? Took out the scissors, cut this part out, cut that part out, did all this sort of stuff. Because you know what? Teachers are individuals. They're not going to play it by the book. And I think that when you saw Glass Lab, not to bring up dead bodies, but when Glass Lab came out here with a lot of game-based curriculum for their SimCity Pollution Challenge and stuff, it was amazing, wonderful, well-researched stuff. And teachers took one look at it and they're like, I'm not going to change my entire classroom because you have given me like a new textbook on how to teach this.
Well,
I'm the teacher.
Textbooks are not the curriculum.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're in the business of, and I don't know if other people should be in the business of, handing off a packet and saying, this is how you do it in your school. What I do think that we can provide, and I'm a role-playing game kind of person, right? Okay. What I do think we should provide are adventure hooks, right? Like, hey, you've done this and you're probably teaching coding. Here is drone. Here are some drone materials that you can use to hook straight into that. Now we're not gonna give you 50 pages on how to do it, but we're gonna give you resources to explore, and we're gonna give you a couple of pages so that you can get started. Right. Same thing with civics curriculum. Same thing with game making curriculum, which is going to pop up this year too. I think that these are all awesome opportunities, pathways, but I don't want to come in there and say, hey, by the way, you've been doing teaching wrong. I'm an esports league, and here's how you should be doing it.
I don't think that. Let's take NASEF's English curriculum for a second. I don't think it was a thing to say you're teaching it wrong. I think it was trying to say, let's take it and do these things that you're already doing, but do them in under a different guise, a different light, something to inspire kids in a different way. Because I know in my role, when I'm telling kids, hey, you got to take English 9, 10, 11, and 12. Well, when they get to their senior years, they're like, do we have to do English 12? I'm like, no, I've got mythology and Gothic Lit and all these other courses that you can choose from. And they're like, most of the kids immediately pick up on the mythology of the Gothic Lit course, just because it is not what they've been doing traditionally. But I do have a suggestion, though, for a game for your league. I would love to.
So you can email it to info@Mischief League.
Well,
go ahead.
The game that I would love for you to do, and I say this half jokingly, is Penn and Teller's Desert Bus.
Oh, I love it.
So if people who don't know what this is, it is literally it was a Sega CD game from the mid 90s where it was literally drive a bus from Los Angeles to Las Vegas in real time and then turn around and drive it back. And that's it. That's the game. So just get from Los Angeles to Vegas and back again, and that's the game. So
in real time.
Yeah, in real time. Yes. So sorry, half jokingly. But as I can see that you could bring in some of those old school games too. You could bring in a Galaga or a Pac-Man or something like that and bring that into this environment.
Not to ruin any surprises, but I think here in Cleveland we are going to have like a retro gaming night where we bring folks in, because there are too many teachers and administrators that I've heard say, I just don't get it, but if you set up Donkey Kong, I will crush you. And I want to give them a moment to shine. Right? It's important for some adults, I'm finding out, to be able to beat kids at games. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on in their lives, but for some of them, they need that too.
Well, the other one I might press for then is NBA Jams. NBA Jams.
You're on fire.
Yeah. Well, Tim Kitzrow is the guy who did the announcing in that game. And if you have not, you would know it if you walk past an NBA Jams machine. You would hear that voice. You'll know who I'm talking about. but he should be an esports shoutcaster for everything. And it's amazing that he hasn't been, the Golden State Warriors used him for a bit for some things, but he should be brought back into the fold of esports somehow, whether it's NBA 2K League or for the Mischief League. Jay, we have very little time left. I wanted to make sure that I gave you an opportunity to plug more of Mischief League. How can people find out more information, get more information about it from you? Where do they learn?
Yeah, I think so. Anything that you want to know, you can grab on mischiefleague.org, as well as our Discord, which just generally has a bunch of wonderful people on it already. This year, we are looking to have somewhere between 2 and 5 different communities. And I say community because actually this league is community based. That was a huge part of Cleveland last year, and one of the most beneficial aspects was being able to play against teachers and students who were in your backyard. Mm-hmm. It made a world of difference compared to competing against somebody across the state who you never knew and never really got to know.
Right.
And so we're looking for communities that have at least 8 teams that are interested. Teams need to have at least 5 students, either middle or high school aged, and those teams can come from schools, libraries, after-school clubs, any of those sorts of things. So
very open.
Very open, yeah, because again, this is not, a common misconception for most teachers, I think, is that if they're going to get involved with esports, it needs to look like the professional scene. Again, you don't see schools outside of Texas going out and building like NFL style stadiums, right? And you don't need that here either. You can get started and explore. And you know what? If you like it, try out some of the other leagues too. There's nothing that says that esports has to be a zero-sum game where there is one esports league that controls them all and one esports league that applies to all students. The reality is that you have different students who are going to want different things. And you would never say that your football team is going to steal players from your baseball team, or your football team is going to steal people from your theater program, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing here. I think that the best thing and the healthiest thing for the esports scene at the high school level is for a bunch of different folks to get involved and to find different homes for different students.
Absolutely. With that, Jay, I think that's a perfect end to the podcast episode. Thank you again for being, I think this is actually your 3rd time. Didn't we have you on in ISTE as well? We did the ISTE roundtable.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're a 3-time guest on the podcast. That's amazing.
Yeah. This is like Letterman or something, right? You only have one person on for like 10 times or something.
I think the next time I'm doing a Skype, you should just see if I'm online, and then you should just call in and just show up into the podcast episode. I think that'd be great.
I'll be a co-host.
That works. Jay Collins, thanks again for being on the Academy of Esports.
Thanks as always. See you around.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.